Hello out there in Radio Land. You're listening to Coffee and Culture on Talk 1260 and 103.7 KTRC, streaming at santafe.com. I'm your host this week, Matthew Chase Daniel, and I'm talking with Larry McNeil. And Larry is a photographer from Alaska, Tlingit tribe, and he has a show coming up which opens on August 9th at Foto Forum. Foto Forum is a small space run by Sage Paisner, and it's on Paseo de Peralta, down the street from the rail yard inside Santa Fe, near to St. Francis. And they always show great work there. And Larry has a show called Raven Dreamt About Light. And there's an opening from 5 to 7 at Foto Forum on August 9th. And Larry will be giving a talk at 5 p.m. there. So come by there and welcome, Larry.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I kind of feel like I'm an honorary New Mexican, because you know what? I got my career started right there in New Mexico back in 1977 when I was still in photo school, so
Is that
feeling
when you did the real Indians photo?
it is. Yeah,
Yeah,
the cool thing about that photo is it was kind of sneaky and I didn't expect it to be, the foundation for future work, but
right.
that photograph really set me free, to be a storyteller
Yeah,
and to use humor in my work too. It's kind of like this magic photograph for me.
yeah. And that's taken at Santo Domingo, Cawa Pueblo, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. It was in December of 77 and I was escaping photo school. On a total whim,
Is that
burned out
when you
again.
were in school at UNM then?
No, I was at school at Brooks Institute of Photography in Santa Barbara.
Right.
And it's a really intensive program. And I was totally burned out. And that night I thought, you know what? I'm out of here. And just tossed a bunch of stuff in the car. Was out at 4 in the morning. Yeah.
Nice. And so, for those who don't know, since we're on the radio or podcast, it's a picture of Larry in front of his old car in front of this building. And I don't think that building exists anymore. I know the building from when I first moved to New Mexico in the late 80s. It was still there. And it's sort of this humorous old trading post with writing across it that says, "Real Indians here, old authentic trading post." I think it used to say JFK visited here at one point. I don't know if that's was on there in that photo, but then it says as seen in Life magazine and all this stuff. Very kitschy, sort of commodification of Native American uh, identity and place and all of that. And you're there um, looking like some scraggly hippie in next to your old car or something, right?
Yeah, that's right. And really, is typical of Route 66 back then. And it's right on the old Route 66.
Yeah,
And you go back in time to the 1930s and there were essentially all these trading posts. Once you hit the Southwest, there were
right.
trading posts the whole way. And a lot of them, were to draw in the tourists and stop here. And of course, the sign is so classic,
Yeah,
Route 66, uh, real Indians.
yeah.
So no fake ones here. You're gonna get the real deal.
The real deal. And you were the real one, even though you weren't from there at all. You're from Alaska. And so, but you found your home in front of the silly sign. I was recently in Tucumcari, New Mexico, which is an old Route 66 town. And it's interesting because first, at a long time ago, 100 or 150 years ago, the railroad came through. And so there's a town built along the tracks, an old adobe town. And
Mhm.
then later, Route 66 came through and they built sort of a new town a few blocks south of the railroad next to Route 66. And then there's all this 30s, 40s, the neon, that architecture there. and then the interstate came through, I-40, which is a few blocks south of Route 66. And now there's McDonald's and gas stations and motels and stuff there. It's like three parallel towns going through time and
Yeah,
space.
that's right. And there's kind of an inside joke from the 1940s too. And it used to be that in Albuquerque, Route 66 used to intersect with itself. And if
Uh-huh.
you took a wrong turn, you'd go east or west. And that's why in Bugs Bunny,
Yeah.
there's a joke said, yeah, I took a left turn at Albuquerque, and
Right.
that was it. Because you could go the wrong direction and end up in LA.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting change in time as freeway the big first big sort of transcontinental or most of the way across highway really changed culture. I mean, I guess the railroads did that before.
Yeah, and you know what? Back to the real Indians thing, you know, th- that photograph, it set the tone for future work,
Hmm.
because it used humor, used this kind of low-key kind of humor. And I discovered that that was the kind of work that I was naturally drawn to anyway.
Yeah.
You know, and any time I feel like I lose my way, it's like, hey, go back to Route 66, man.
Right.
You will find your way, and it works.
Yeah.
Like every creative person, has this quandary at some point. What do you make work about?
Right.
The proverbial blank page. And for me, I keep a journal. I've had a journal since I was a teenager, and a lot of my works have come directly out of the journals,
Yeah.
and
I love
and
how a lot of your work um, even has typewritten or handwritten text in it. It's photography, and sometimes there's lithography and different kinds of photography, and sometimes layered, but there's often this text narrative that's part of it. So in a way, it's using poetry and and that adds to the humor, I think, because a lot of the
yeah,
stuff
that's
you write
right.
is just ridiculous and hilarious.
A really good example of that is the one titled "In the True Spirit of White Man,"
Hmm.
and it's this panoramic kind of photograph where it's kind of an abstracted background, and there's an old beat up car, painted like the American flag, and the journal entry was about teasing Edward Curtis.
Right.
It's kind of it's not really, it's kind of a riff.
Yeah.
That's a good way of describing. It's like open up the journal and pull out my pen and write these riffs down and go get some coffee and get to work on other stuff. And
Yeah.
so yeah, that's a good way as any is, describing my own creative process, is yeah, go back to these riffs and when I'm at these quandaries, it's like, okay, what am I gonna do next? Hey, I'll just open up the journal and there's the journal entry, and I titled it "In the True Spirit of White Man."
Right.
And I thought, wow, that would be a cool thing to make a photograph out of, a print, make a print
Right.
out of. And
And you have those journals, so when you get stuck, you can go back to the journal entry, maybe from last month, but maybe from 10 years ago, or there's all sorts of little snippets of ideas in those.
yeah, that's right. And that's so the only thing I've got a shortage of now is time.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
So,
time goes by faster as we get older, I've noticed.
yeah, that's right. So gotta stay busy here and keep pumping it out, man.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad you're coming back down here. We're going to go to a break in a little bit, but so you were at the Brooks Institute in Santa Barbara studying photography, and then you ended up after that at some point at UNM, yeah, studying there.
Yeah, my original intention was always to go to UNM. And back in 1977, I went to visit the school, but it was closed because of the Christmas break.
Hmm.
And Newhall was head of the department back then.
Uh-huh.
So I started corresponding with him, and he sent me a couple of form letters. And, and,
Right.
and once I introduced myself, he thought I'd be a good recruit for them. So he sent me a couple of nice letters. And so that was the original intent all along, was to go to UNM right after Brooks.
Yeah.
But life got in the way.
Yeah, we have to go to a break. We'll be right back. My name's Matthew Chase Daniel. You're listening to Coffee and Culture, and I'm talking with photographer and comedian Larry McNeil. You're back listening to Coffee and Culture. I'm talking with Larry McNeil. He has a show at Foto Forum, which is on Paseo de Peralta in Santa Fe, opening August 9th from 5 to 7 p.m. He'll be giving a talk at 5 p.m. there. So check it out. You can go to Foto Forum's website or Instagram or Facebook or all those ways of getting information to find out more. So was there a break? There was a break between Brooks and UNM?
There was, including teaching at the Institute of American Indian Arts back in the 90s. And
Uh-huh.
really love that too. I found another one, a latent gift is what I called it. I didn't know I had it, so
Yeah.
I didn't know whether I'd be able to teach or not, but it came really naturally, and I enjoyed working with the young students. And that was just going to be a couple of years, but man, it just went on and on and on. It was good though. It was very good. And
Yeah.
that's where when I was teaching at IAIA, I met Patrick Nagatani when he was teaching at UNM. He
Yeah.
was a visiting artist. And so that's when I kind of got reintroduced to the idea of, going back to grad school. And I didn't know Nagatani before that. And
Right.
I was thinking, wow, he is amazing. I'd like to actually go there. And of course I ended up going there a couple of years later,
Yeah.
and fully credit UNM, everything about it was really great. And the thing I loved the most about that experience was I was able to immerse myself deeply into the art for the very first time in years.
Right. Just
Felt
making
like
the work.
that's right. It was
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
I
When I first moved to New Mexico in late 80s, early 90s was right about the time I think Nuclear Enchantment, Nagatani's book came out, which just was very inspiring to me. And I looked
Mhm.
through it a million times. And later now I run a little art gallery with a friend in a truck um, in New Mexico based out of Santa Fe. And we've shown Patrick's work a few times years ago. And it was just such a pleasure to work with him and be able to share his work with other people. We showed some of his stuff he did with masking tape over images. Was weird and fun. And um, I really, and he was just such a kind and generous person, I found. It was great to work with him. I'm sure he was a great teacher as well. Yeah.
Yeah, really great mentor, for
Yeah.
so many people. And I feel so fortunate to have had that time. And when I first met him, I was really taken in by one of his lithographs,
Hmm.
the layered look. And I always wanted to have that, in my own collection, and never could afford it. And a couple years ago, I went to talk at his memorial, and when they had that very print up for auction.
Uh-huh.
There it was at the memorial. And so I kept on adding to it, and I won it. I won it.
Oh,
And I
fantastic.
felt, yeah, so that was so nice because the money went into a scholarship fund. And now I have my very favorite print of his that so everything about it was really great.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you've worked in lithography too, which is a little unusual maybe for a photographer, and sort of works with your way of layering imagery, and including text. And it's a way of making work that, you know, well, I guess there's also you work in platinum and palladium and silver and digital and lithography. And it seems like each of those mediums um, have a different character to themselves. I won't say spirit because I know. Um, but they have a different character. And so as you make work, it feels like you move into the different medium that's appropriate for that body of work.
Yeah, that's right. And each one has its own strengths. And I think the really beautiful challenge, is bringing your own uh, way of seeing the world into that medium, whatever it is.
Hmm.
And just kind of exploring and seeing what can happen with it. And the thing I really loved about lithography was collaborating with the master printer, at the
Yeah,
Tamarind. Um, I fully credit them. The master printers were able to do things really quickly that I would have gotten stuck on. You
right.
know, uh, for example, the 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 one titled "First Light, Winter Solstice."
Hmm.
That was a very complex lithograph to make, very, very complex. And Bill Lagoda, I think that's his name.
Hmm.
I'm
I'm not
probably
sure.
butchering his name. My apologies to Bill. Um, but he figured it out. I had a photograph and it was turning out into mush.
Right.
And there's no way in heck I could have fixed that as a lithographer. But you know what? He looked at it, he said, yeah, try this, this, and this. And it worked. Wow. I
Yeah.
was incredibly impressed with their artistic, and their technical knowledge. And so anyway, that's what really brought, the beauty. And I was able to visualize this scene, and the master lithographers are able to realize it with me. And
Yeah, that's such a gift to have someone who is a master of the medium to help you get there. Because that print, as I recall, it's sort of a restaging of a Edward Curtis photograph, The Vanishing Race or whatever. And
yeah.
instead of the like natives trotting off into the sunset at the end of their time, it's people on their way to a winter ceremonial, and um they're going by an old broken down truck in the desert or something, right? Which
That's right.
reminded me also of Nagatani, of his whole series of excavating old Packards at Chaco Canyon and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So that's one of our commonalities actually is our love of not just vintage cars, but cars in general. I mean, yeah. And
Yeah. Yeah, there's cars in a lot of your work. And you work with real cars or model cars or both, or
both. Yeah, some of it is just what dumb luck.
yeah.
First of all, I really love 1959 Cadillacs.
Hmm.
You know, the look, in my opinion, it totally epitomizes American cars. And you think about planet Earth, on planet Earth, what epitomizes, the culture of automobiles? America. We're the ones. We're the guilty party.
Right.
Hey, we're
The
guilty. Call
carbon
these cars.
burners.
Yeah. And of all those cars through all those decades, there's that huge big boat of a 1959 Cadillac with a big old V8 hog in it. And it was futuristic. It had air conditioning, electric windows, and those big fins that made it look like an airplane. This thing was made to fly on the interstates, man.
Yeah.
So interstates were new. Interstates are brand new after World War II. So that was made for cruising long distances and comfort, you
Right.
know. So anyway, for that reason, I selected that 59 Cadillac for a lot of the works,
Yeah.
including
That one with Tonto and the Lone Ranger, and the Lone Ranger's in jail in the mud prison. And is that that car?
yeah, that's right. And you know what? That was a real car. So I found my son was playing lacrosse. I
Hmm.
was dropping him off at a junior high, and there it was. There was that 1959 Cadillac in the parking lot. It looked brand new. It looks like it just came off the showroom floor. So I walked over there, and a young guy, must have been 20, came out and he got in the car, and I went over and knocked on his window. I said, "Hey, can I talk to you?" And he got out, and I said, "I love your car. Can I make photographs of it?" And I had my pro camera with me as usual. I keep it with me.
Yeah.
So I did a photo shoot right then and there. Moved it into the shades and did a 360-degree, you know,
Right. So you
entire
had your
circumference.
material for every for future things all there.
I That's right. So I must have shot 1,000 shots,
Wow.
just like a professional. Hey, I'm a pro. And did it all within like 20 minutes.
Nice.
And so anyway, that's where that car came from. It's from that young man's 59 Cadillac. And all I did was I changed it into a turquoise color,
Right.
and so that was pretty easy to do.
Yeah.
And
We got to go to another break. We're right back.
okay.
Talking with Larry McNeil, who's got a show coming up at Foto Forum. You're back listening to Coffee and Culture. We're on Talk 1260 and 103.7 KTRC, streaming at santafe.com, live on the radio at 2 p.m. Saturday, and then repeated on Sunday, and then up as a podcast after that at santafe.com or at chasedaniel.com, which is my website, or on Spotify and things like that. And I was talking to another photographer recently, Danny Lyons, who's did a lot of photography as civil rights movement and stuff. There's a new film out, The Bike Riders, based on his book. He's a
Mhm.
total car enthusiast as well. It's
Mhm.
interesting. But they are sort of these iconic things. And I'm into cars. Mostly I'm into the old step van, aluminum step van that I run the gallery in. So I'm sitting in the car all day, all the time. So
Oh,
uh,
very cool. Love that.
yeah, it's uh it's a thing, a photographer's thing. Um, I want to talk a little bit about the Raven as a cultural figure among in the Northwest Coast, and the White Raven and the Box of Daylight and that story, which sort of maybe recurs through your work. Um, Raven as a sort of trickster character, maybe similar to coyote stories in New Mexico. Um,
Mhm.
and just can you tell me a little bit about the
Yeah,
Raven?
sure. And if you look at all the different cultures of the world, our commonality are myths, ancient myths, even more contemporary myths, movie myths, and but anyway, the commonality is the myths. And for us, Tlingit in the Northwest Coast, the Raven is part of a creation story.
Hmm.
Because hey, we've all got these eternal questions. Who are we? Where are we from?
Hmm.
We want to assign meaning to our lives, is what it's all about, and we want to have our lives have meaning, so that includes the origin story. So for us it's humorous. It's kind of low-key humor as a part of the creation story. And part of that, White Raven story is a greedy aristocrat. Yeah, we had lots of greedy aristocrats in ancient times, in our culture,
Well, that's
you know.
good. That's
Yeah,
relevant to our culture today,
yeah, so this
broader
greedy
culture.
aristocrat, yeah, so this aristocrat was so incredibly greedy, sorry, that he actually stole the sun from the sky. I mean,
Wow.
visualize that level of greed. It's going to take light away from humanity, and that's such a great metaphor too.
Yeah, I thought
Agree.
that was the coal-fired power plants that were stealing the sun from the sky.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's continuing, stealing the light from people. So light could be used as a metaphor for life, really. Stealing life, stealing light. And of course back then Raven was white. You
Hmm.
know, so one of the reasons why Raven turned black is because when he was stealing, or she was probably a she,
Hmm.
because he stole the sun from the greedy aristocrat and had to go through a smoke hole. And by going through the smoke hole there, it turned black. So now
Ah,
so now we see black ravens. And
right.
originally, so you know what that means, that from a metaphorical standpoint, there's often a price to be paid for heroic acts. You
Uh-huh.
know, and that was it. This being could no longer, be this beautiful white. Now it's going to go through existence. It's going to go through eternity as a black raven now. And but you know, it brought light to the world.
Right.
So yeah, so
And there's a beauty in the blackness too. I mean, I
mhm.
think I was reading something that you were saying about your work with the platinum prints, that the platinum can get these deepest, wonderful blacks, and that series of called feathers that you did, where you just have these deep, incredibly beautiful blacks in the work. And obviously, as a photographer and working sometimes in black and white photography, um, the whites and the blacks are the extremes and the things that are hard to reach.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because with black and white photography, it's about a tonal range. It's almost, you can visualize the black and white rainbow. And with a lot of the photographic papers, they go to this deep black, but it's a very distinct kind of black. And it was only when I saw those platinum papers, it was a different kind of black. It was
Hmm.
kind of like a charcoal black, as opposed to a glossy black,
Hmm.
very different.
One that
And
sucks you in,
yeah, and
sort
you know
of.
what? With a cotton rag paper, you could actually see into it, you
Uh-huh.
know.
You're
So it
not just
had a,
looking at the surface.
that's right. So with palladium, it became three-dimensional,
Hmm.
which is pretty amazing, for a process. So that's what I really loved about it. You could actually see into the print, and it has a three-dimensional feel to it. Whereas a lot of prints, like inkjet paper,
Yeah.
love inkjet, made so many thousands of them, you know, but the ink sits on the surface of the paper. You
Right.
know, that's one of the key differences. And so anyway,
Right.
so
Because
for
silver, platinum, or palladium, it's in the paper and you're activating it with light in the enlarger or the contact print. Whereas with inkjet, you just have white paper that's any white paper. It doesn't really matter. And you're
that's
squirting
right.
ink on top. Um,
Yeah.
Great.
Same with the darkroom prints. They can take on that three-dimensional look because of the layers of emulsion, including that gelatin clear one on top. It's a kind of reminds me of, with cars, they have a clear coat.
Right.
You know, that's what gelatin is for darkroom prints. It's a clear
Right.
coat.
Yeah, I like that.
Allows you to actually see into the metal,
Yeah.
so that's pretty cool.
Is it getting hard to get the materials for these processes
Well,
as digital becomes more of a thing?
it is. So a lot of the silver darkroom materials are disappearing. For example, my own favorite was Agfa Portriga,
Hmm.
because it rendered skin so incredibly well. I never seen another black and white paper as good as Portriga, and so it no longer exists. And I wish it did, because then hey, I'd be able to shoot more portraits and print them in the darkroom, and
Right.
but but there's always other ones to step in, other brands have stepped in. And here's a quirky thing for you. It's the young people in their 20s that are now dominating analog photography. I don't know if you know that,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but that's a really cool thing, and I really love that. It's like, yeah, it's the younger generation. They're the ones who are really keeping film alive. The
Yeah.
analog
The same
process.
way they like vinyl records instead of uh CD or streaming.
Uh,
It has that analog quality to it, which has more, I don't know, life or humanity or something. It can't be broken down into ones and zeros. And
Yeah,
So much is
you know what?
broken down that in these binary ways now. That's it's a revolution against that.
That's exactly right. You can something you can touch with your hands, you
Yeah,
know, the vinyl, or the film, or go in the dark room and you can smell the chemicals and you can make the print look so different by doing these different things in the trays. That's
yeah,
hands-on, being in there with the stink and getting it done.
yeah. It's really important, and it's I mean, so much I think of so many different things in life, but especially photography has just ended up on screens.
Mhm.
Because we can consume so much. We Google image search whatever we want, and there we have it, and not looking at a print of it. Um, and I guess that happens with painting and drawing and all these things, but maybe more with photography
Mhm.
than with other things. Um,
Yeah, and one of my favorite classes to teach the past couple of years has been film photography.
mhm,
Because the beauty of it, the students, a lot of them didn't even know what film was. They
right.
didn't know how to put film in a camera.
Yeah,
They're perplexed, and I'm thinking it's like not knowing how to dial a phone, right?
that's right. With your finger, and yeah,
Yeah, but it's really great. They catch on so fast, and within, by the end of the semester, they're making these beautiful prints.
yeah,
And I really love that because that's the younger generation that's going to know how to do it the right way.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
great. We got to
Hey,
go to another break.
okay.
So we'll be right back with Larry McNeil. You're back listening to Coffee and Culture. My name is Matthew Chase Janney. I'm talking with Larry McNeil. Larry's got a show coming up August 9th at Foto Forum here in Santa Fe. He also has work in the current show at the New Mexico Museum of Art, Latin Contemporary, which is a show of works made in New Mexico between 1970 and 2000. Um, so I was getting ready for this conversation, and I didn't know he had a work in there. So it was a great pleasure a couple of days ago to stumble upon it and see it. So thank you for that. And you use the Lone Ranger and Tonto repeatedly in different pieces, yeah. They're sort of a recurring holder for different the narratives and the humor you're using.
Yeah, I really love it because the Lone Ranger and Tonto were before my time. I never saw them as a kid. I take that back. I did see the Lone Ranger and Tonto comics when I was like in the fifth grade. They
Uh-huh.
were still common then, but the TV series was already gone by the time I was, young.
Right,
But I do remember it. I'd see it on, like reruns and all that stuff. And for the longest time when I was a teenager, that was a lot of my white friends in Alaska. That's all they knew about natives, about
right,
indigenous people was Tonto. And they'd say, "Oh yeah," and I'd tell them, "Yeah, I'm from the Tlingit tribe." And the most common response I'd get from my white friends was, "Oh yeah, just like Tonto, right?" I
right.
said, "No, not like Tonto." You know,
Well, that's like the Curtis images as the, Curtis is such a complicated figure because he did take a lot of great he was took wonderful photographs and documented a lot, but he also dressed people up in ways that they wouldn't dress up in sort of homogenized indigenous culture in his vision rather than in um, the indigenous vision of each culture and the distinctness of the different cultures. Um, and so I think maybe Tonto was a descendant of Curtis, or maybe the Lone Ranger was the descendant of Curtis.
yeah, and with Tonto, I wanted to turn the tables and turn Tonto into the intellectual, and have the Lone Ranger be the goofy sidekick who is uneducated. And with Edward Curtis, he epitomizes manifest destiny.
Yeah,
He got his funding from JP Morgan, and the whole premise of his magnum opus body of work, he titled it The Vanishing Race. The premise was to make photographs of the indigenous people of the Americas before they're completely gone,
Right.
which is why he called it The Vanishing Race. And and you think, hey, wait a sec, he's talking about murder. He's
Right.
talking about manifest destiny. Is
Right.
making photographs about the elimination of entire tribes of people who don't exist anymore.
Right.
And and really, that's the worst of what America is about.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was, it was worth examining,
Yeah.
making work about. And I still do, because that's a part of American history that really hasn't been really recognized and acknowledged as it should be acknowledged.
Yeah.
So until then, I'm going to keep on making it.
Until everyone realizes
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I like in that it's like a old cartoon and it's Tonto punching Curtis in the jaw. And what is he said in the text is your vanishing Indian paradigm just doesn't fit our native epistemology. Here is to deconstructionist theories. Very
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I mean about Tonto morphing into an intellectual, you know,
yeah,
and
yeah. And the
but
Lone
some of
Rangers is always sort of in the background and looking a little sad and out of place, right?
yeah, yeah. But with the Edward Curtis work, it's not necessarily about Tonto and the Lone Ranger. So there are quite a few of the Edward Curtis series that don't have Tonto and the Lone Ranger in it too.
Right.
You know, um,
Yeah, like that one we were talking about earlier, that lithograph. Um, first first light winter solstice is one of those, right?
yeah,
Refers
yeah,
to Curtis, but it doesn't have them. Um, you're talking something I was reading about. You're invited to these cordially invited to participate in exhibitions called Spirit Capture, praising the spirit of Native America. Um, and there's all this sort of cultural in the dominant culture, the beautiful Indian who's in touch with nature and has a inherent connection to the natural world and the understanding of the rhythms of life and all this stuff, which is a very romanticized uh, vision. And so you made this series of like telephone poles instead of totem poles as these spiritual works, very tongue in cheek.
yeah, yeah, that's right. So back then I was getting self-conscious about, you know, being invited to all these exhibitions, with spirit in the title, and mixed feelings because they were great shows. And I was, very, delighted to be a participant, but this has to do with you, I made this when I was living in Santa Fe, by the way.
Mhm.
So I was living in Santa Fe,
The
for
heart of the spiritual Native American spiritual community, right?
yeah, that's right. It's where you could go out for a good meal, Friday night. And, you look at the bulletin board, out in the waiting area, and you see all these things on the wall, spiritual shaman, the shaman will do this for you and do a spiritual cleansing all over Santa Fe. And I don't know if it still is, but
Less so, thankfully, a little less so than it was in the 80s and the 90s. Yeah.
yeah, this was kind of nutty, and so after I actually put that in one of my journals, about, being a spiritual master, and tongue in cheek, just
Yeah.
totally satirical. And so it's a series of 5 prints called the Sacred Series. And each one of them, the text came straight out of the journal. I didn't change anything.
Right.
So my challenge was okay, I'm going to take this paragraph and I'm going to make a photograph out of it. take this next photograph, make another one, and so on and so on and so on. So it was one page that I wrote about spirituality, tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
And so it turned into this series of 5 prints. It was fun. So I think that's where a lot of creative work comes from too. Just stuff you see every day.
Yeah.
And that was a perfect example of something I saw every day.
Right.
And I that just seemed quirky, and I thought, you know what, this will be a fun thing to make work about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Being a
That's great.
spiritual master.
Is the work that you're showing at Foto Forum, is it one body of work or is it from different things or?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I was figuring this show out, I wanted it to be about to cross time.
Hmm.
I wanted it to be about the future, wanted it to be about today, right now, and I wanted it to go back in time a little too. So it has this breadth and time to it. So that's what I was looking for the premise of the show,
Hmm.
which is why I titled it Raven Dreamt About Light, because that's what I kept on visualizing, and seeing myself. And I actually made the photograph when I was photographing. I traveled to the largest open pit coal mine in North America. It's called the Antelope Mines, and it's in Wyoming.
Hmm.
So I was traveling there to photograph the coal mines, actually. And on my way back, I saw this scene. So that scene from the photograph, Raven Dreamt About Light, was from the journey back from the coal mines. So that's kind of a goofy metaphor too. It's like, yeah, I had a rough day in the coal mines, man. And that photograph is one of the results of it.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
that's one aspect. Another aspect, is things like being an indigenous person. And one of the photographs I really love, it's titled "The Woman's Honor Song," ResNet. And I made that photograph for Wilma Mankiller because I used to host these First Nations conferences here at our university.
Hmm.
And Wilma Mankillers, she's one of the leaders of the Cherokee Nation, and very well known. So she was going to be our keynote speaker, and so I always made posters for them. So this was a poster for it. And in that year, I wanted to make an image that honored tribal women of the Americas,
Nice.
and especially for her, so
Yeah.
that she could arrive here and she'd be able to see that poster. And
Be
unfortunately,
welcomed. Yeah.
yeah, so unfortunately, she got sick and couldn't make it. Um,
Larry, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're out of time, so we gotta end it there. I look forward to seeing you, meeting you when you're in town. And please, everyone, come out to Foto Forum on August 9th, 5 p.m. Larry will be speaking about the exhibition there, and you can see his work. So thank you.
yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.